Well now, the diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying bugs, kinda casting sickly shadows across this year worn-out Formica table. You could smell hamburgers drifting in from the kitchen, mixed with the sharp sizzle of grease, a real contrast to how quiet it was. Outside, that November wind was throwing snow against the windows, sounded like fingernails on glass. Nature trying to claw its way into our little hideaway. I'd been watching her for near an hour, this stranger, auburn hair, just stirring her coffee, but not drinking it. Her eyes flicking nervous like toward the highway, looking like she was running from something in this blizzard, her hand tapping out a tap-tap on the table, keeping time with her worry. When our eyes finally met across this lonely truck stop, I knew that look, that hunger for something to take your mind off the road.
"They're saying the pass ain't gonna clear till morning," she said, sliding into the booth across from me, smelling like rain, damp wool, and something sweeter.
"Mind if I join you?" We swapped the usual traveler's howdies. Where from, where to, what for, till the waitress brought our third cup of joe, black and empty as the abyss, stirring the talk.
Like it always does in these kind of places, towards darker things.
"Ever hear tell of stories about this stretch of road?"
she asked, her voice dropping low, like she was telling ghost stories.
"Locals say there's something out there in the hills."
They call it the Mothman. I felt a chill run down my back. I couldn't hold back a laugh, nor the motion of my hand to my left forearm, where under my flannel shirt lay a memory etched in discolored skin that never fully healed.
"The Mothman," I said, tasting the word like bitter medicine. "Yes, I've experienced more than stories." Her eyes got wide, pupils growing in the dim light.
"You don't mean 17 years ago?"
I started, my voice taking on that hollow tone for old memories.
I was hauling refrigerated goods from Chicago to Santa Monica. A young driver on a tight schedule, pushing too hard, driving too late. Claw marks raked the side of my cab that night. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, black as tar pits, still as a tomb.
It was just past midnight, somewhere west of Gallup, a darkness you only find in forgotten places, where stars press down like accusatory eyes, you know. The radio had long since dissolved into static, leaving only ghost voices and the hum of my tires on the asphalt for company. The engine's low growl, my only friend. I paused, watching her face. Most folks would offer a polite smile, assuming a trucker's tall tale, but she leaned forward, lips slightly parted, already hooked, her fingers tightening on that mug. That blowout struck without warning, sounded like a gunshot, followed by a violent pull to the right. The cab shuddered as I wrestled 18 tons of steel to a stop on the shoulder, facing miles of empty road ahead and the same emptiness behind. I set about changing that tire. A simple task, though the night had turned unseasonably cold for October, a biting wind cutting right through. My breath plumed before me like ectoplasm as I worked. The only sounds the metallic clicks of the lug wrench and a distant mournful owl's cry. It was when the truck was jacked up that I first sensed something amiss, a pressure in the air, like the tension before lightning strikes. My skin prickled as a smell followed. Not unpleasant, yet wrong, like ozone, copper, and overripe fruit. This year diner seemed to fade, the clatter of plates and murmured conversations drowned by the weight of my story. Another trucker glancing our way. I told myself it was nothing, maybe just the desert's isolation playing tricks. Yet, as I kept on working, a primal kind of feeling started growing in me. I was being watched, yeah, a rustle in the dark kinda making me uneasy. She nodded, barely, like her coffee forgotten, beads of water gathering on the mug like it was sweating, her leaning in closer. When I stood up straight and turned around, I figured it'd be another vehicle, another fellow traveler needing some help. But the beams kinda flickered as, instead, something else stood at the edge of my headlights. It stood tall, easy 7 feet, maybe more, proportions all wrong, kinda human-like but twisted, like it was made out of mismatched parts, with shoulders too wide and arms too long, bending in unnatural places, its shadow looming large. The waitress came over with a coffee pot, but feeling the mood at our booth, she backed off without filling us up. My friend didn't even notice. Her eyes stayed locked on me like she was looking right through me. But the eyes? Yeah.
The eyes are what I remember the clearest. Red, not like the light from an animal caught in my headlights, but burnin' from the inside, like two hot coals in a face with no features, glowin' with their own dyin' star light and puttin' off heat. I swallowed hard, tastin' that bitter fear that went up my throat that night. Yeah, and my hands were shakin'. It didn't make a peep, no holler, no howdy-do, just kinda stared me down, its mood all bottled up, its face, if you could call it that, hid in the shadows, even with my bright shinin' right at it, them beams dancin' around. "What did you do then?" she breathed, her knuckles white as bone wrapped around her mug, the mug doin' a little jig. What any sane fellow would. I tossed my tools and hightailed it to the cab, ready to ride on a flat if I had to. My heart was thumpin' like a drum solo when the air behind me got all stirred up, like that whoosh you get for a subway train. That memory gave my left arm a familiar twinge, an old ache from way back when. I spun around, and it was standin' right there, close enough to spit, without a sound to warn me it had crossed them 30 feet. A soft rustle gave it away as now. Distance didn't hide its big old wings, folded up like a monstrous moth, but scaled and rough like a bat left out too long. Her breathin' got shallow, her eyes so big and black you couldn't see nothin' else in that dim light. It reached for me, if reachin' is the word for a limb that ain't like no human arm. No hand at the end, just long fingers tipped with hooks like a hawk's claw. Its arm jumped as one of them things grazed my arm as I dove headfirst into the cab. Slow, real slow, I rolled up my left sleeve, seein' 3 scars runnin' from my wrist to my elbow. Raised and white they was, against my skin, which ain't seen much sun lately. Looked like some kind of map, out of this world, gleamin' soft like. The hurt, Lord, it weren't like no cut or burn. Felt like a freezin' fire, like electricity hummin' through the bone instead of flesh. My eyes went blurry, and I think I remember hollerin', either from the pain or just plain old terror I couldn't rightly say. Somehow, don't ask me how, I slammed that door shut and got that engine cranked. God almighty, I must have drove 80 miles on that tire, shredded to hell, the rim sparkin' on the asphalt, the engine screamin'. All the while, I kept looking in that rear view, knowing it was right behind me. But it didn't follow, did it? I shook my head, slow. Not that you could see, but for months, I'd wake up at night, feelin' it watch me through my bedroom window, seein' red flashes in storefront glass when I drove by, hearin' the softest flutter of wings in empty rooms for 3 months straight. And them scars? She asked, barely a whisper over the wind howlin' outside, snow beatin' on the glass. The doc called it an unusual animal attack, gave me some pills and a shot, said something about tetanus, but the stitches wouldn't hold. Never healed right. They ache something fierce for a storm, and in my dreams, they glow with that same red light as them awful eyes. She sat back, breathin' out like she'd been holdin' it since Tuesday. Lord have mercy, she whispered. But, you really think it was the Mothman? That critter from the stories? Her hands were shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. I reckon, I said, careful as I could, that them dark corners got things in 'em we ain't named or written down. Things you just catch out of the corner of your eye, slippin' away when you look straight at 'em, feedin' on fear, confusion, and all kinds of mess. Something we just ain't meant to understand. I rolled my sleeve down real slow, hidin' them scars. The old stories say that Mothman shows up 'fore bad things happen. Seen 'fore the Silver Bridge went down in '67. 'Fore fires, floods, and mines caved in. Maybe he's a sign of what's comin', or maybe he's just drawn to all that bad energy when something terrible's gonna happen, like a buzzard smellin' something dyin'. And since you saw him, you seen him again? I looked at her face in that bright light, seeing how she wanted to know, how she was fightin' between believin' and bein' scared, her brow all furrowed up. 3 years after I met that thing, I said soft-like. A tanker truck flipped over on that same old stretch, burned for 3 days straight and took 6 souls with it, sirens howling in my memory. Her hand went up to her throat without her even thinking.
1 week before the wreck, the local rag reported some mighty peculiar animal sightings. Said there was this huge winged thing seen near the roadside, with its red eyes glowing in the dark, out by Gallup. The storm outside, she just kept getting worse, snow spinning round like a dang tornado against the glass. The few folks left in here were talking real quiet, like they were scared of drawing attention from something out there. Shadows moving all around outside. Is it true then? She asked, real soft-like. Did your story really happen like that? I touched my arm where the scars were hidden, feeling that cold burn that never really goes away. She leaned in closer. True as this storm keeping us here? I said, true as the night outside. Our faces stared back at us from the dark window. 2 strangers stuck together by chance and spooky stories. But behind our ghostly faces, I could have swore I saw something else in the glass, tall and twisted, with eyes burning like hot coals. The dark just hung there, and a low hum shook the glass as the lights flickered, and someone gasped.